That massive outperformance is letting me know that he's probably going to be making a pretty substantial move in 2024. In this video, we're going to talk about the greatest investor of all time, the man who's been consistent, and in this confusing market, what better way to understand how to invest than looking at the best. And so I'm going to make a few bold predictions here of what I think Buffett's going to do in 2024. And the moves that he's recently made have been pretty interesting here. And I think there's one big position he's going to add on a market turmoil dip. Now, most of us know Buffett as pretty much a perma bull. He buys forever, he holds forever, and it's definitely paid dividends. But over the last year and a half, Warren Buffett's actually been a net seller of stocks, amassing roughly $147 billion of cash, where he's rolling treasuries right now, earning a yield of over 5% on $147 billion, which is telling me a few different things. Number one, I believe he's going to make a tremendous deal in the very near future because liquidity constraints that are taking place in the market is going to present an opportunity very similar to Occidental. If you guys don't remember the Occidental deal, this is where Berkshire helped bankroll the Occidental Anadarko deal that actually made me question the deal because I didn't even think Occidental's growth and balance sheet could sustain what they were paying out on preferred stock, but it worked out for both parties. I mean, this deal was so good for Buffett and seemed so bad for Occidental that even Carl Icahn thought that this deal was a travesty and that Buffett took Occidental to the cleaners. And now where we are in the business cycle, we're starting to see mergers and acquisitions take place. This usually happens at end of cycle when stock prices start getting depressed and companies that are not fiscally responsible need to have takeovers, or companies that want to be more competitive have to do mergers and acquisitions. And we're starting to see that take place here for deals like Campbell Soup acquiring Sovos, Smucker's acquiring Hostess, Chevron acquiring Hess, and Cisco acquiring Splunk. These deals are starting to happen now, and the reason why I believe Buffett has a tremendous amount of capital on the sidelines is twofold. Number one, I believe we're going to see some big acquisitions taking place, and Buffett can finance some pretty great deals. Because let's be honest, a lot of your traditional banks and a lot of the traditional funding right now is pretty much dried up and non-existent. The second fold is, I believe we are going to head into a recession. All leading indicators are pointing to a recession, and you usually get market bottoms when a confirmed recession happens. So for Buffett having a pretty substantial amount of money on the sidelines, I think he's ready to accumulate some stocks. And I'm going to tell you what stocks I think he might accumulate here. We can see here in the recent 13F filing that Buffett's value of his portfolio is sitting right around $350 billion. And he has an additional $150 billion in cash liquid on the sidelines right now, which is telling me that large of a cash position is obviously letting us know that there's going to be some sort of opportunities that Buffett is seeing. And maybe I'm wrong, and just the opportunity is just accumulating 5.5% right now, risk-free. When we look at the Occidental deal that Buffett did in the past, he was getting double that in just dividends, and that's not including the stock appreciation that he got for getting those preferred shares. That massive outperformance is letting me know that he's probably going to be making a pretty substantial move in 2024. And when we look at Buffett's portfolio, 51% of the portfolio is made up of Apple. Yeah, and just breezing through this portfolio, we can see that he's obviously overweight technology with Apple. Financials, consumer staples, and energy is where the focus of this portfolio truly is. Driven around the consumer and basically driven around a strong consumer. When we think about the financial exposure that he has with both Bank of America and American Express, it's pretty clear, regardless of where we are in the economic cycle, Buffett is confident that consumers are going to consume. That's been a pretty good bet over a long period of time. Surprising thing is actually, I'm surprised that he's holding so much Bank of America, but we all know he got in at a really, really good price on Bank of America. When we look at interest rates rising and the performance of these banks and kind of their hands being restricted to being able to really grow their EPS because they're not really lending and they have to keep capital requirements a little bit higher now. Banks are kind of an area I personally would avoid along with REITs. But if you are going to own a bank, it's probably JP Morgan or Bank of America. Now, I want to make it known that he does have Citigroup on here as a very small holding, less than 1%. So let me give you my bold predictions on what I think could happen here. First, let's start with Occidental. I don't think the story is over on energy companies now merging. I think we're going to see more acquisitions on the energy side because it seems that we are not producing a lot of oil. And so the only way to grow your oil reserves is to actually acquire companies at this point in time. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Occidental make an acquisition here probably by the end of 2024, the latest. Wouldn't surprise me if we start hearing things pretty soon here. I'm willing to bet that Buffett will be the bank on this acquisition. If something is working, why not keep doing the same thing over again? It's definitely been working for Occidental, and it's definitely been working for Buffett. And so I think this is going to be moving forward, as we're going to see a big consolidation in energy companies. The second bold prediction I have here is that Buffett's going to add a new position to his portfolio, and I think it will be a top 10 holding. Now, of course, I do think there needs to be a market pullback, but my bold prediction is Buffett is eventually going to add Google to his portfolio. When we look at these big tech companies, to me, it's pretty clear to see that Google has some turmoil here. But when we look long term, they're definitely going to be a top player in AI. We already know them as the biggest player in search engine, but I also think they could be the biggest player in entertainment platforms. This is one of those companies where when we look at Buffett's portfolio and he has a 51% holding in a company like Apple, when we talk about Apple, Microsoft, and Google, I think being overweight these types of companies is completely fine. The question is buying them at the right price. And I really think Google's sitting at an interesting price here. If it breaks right around $100 a share, I don't see how Buffett's going to look away from the opportunity that Google has, from the track record that Google has. When we look from a valuation standpoint from your mega tech companies, Google is a pretty good deal. And so it will not surprise me if this becomes one of his top 10 holdings in 2024. Amazon is in Buffett's portfolio, but less than 0.5% holding here. I do think in 2024, if we go through a recession and these prices go and these stocks go on sale, I do believe that Amazon will be greater than a 0.5% holding in Buffett's portfolio. So just to recap here, the three moves I think is going to happen here is Occidental is going to acquire another company. Buffett's going to be the bank for this acquisition. Number two is I believe Google will be a top 10 holding by the end of 2024 for Buffett. Number three is he's definitely going to be adding into Amazon. The biggest surprise I actually see with Buffett's portfolio here is the fact he's very underweight healthcare, and I believe the only healthcare stock I saw on his list was a pretty small holding in Johnson & Johnson. And the other thing I find interesting is that there's not a lot of REIT exposure for Buffett as well. A guy that's known to love dividends and good balance sheets and free cash flow have any REIT exposure in his portfolio, and I actually find that pretty interesting. Let me know down in the comments if you think Buffett's going to make any interesting acquisitions, and what stocks are you currently looking at. As always, appreciate your time. We will see you in the next one.